Welcome back to Stab the Dragon Productions for episode number 138. Movie review number 7, as tonight we examine 12 Strong, the declassified true story of the horse soldiers. Now this movie I rate as a solid A. I give it a 9 out of 10. Modern day military classic, if you will. I think it's a must-see for all Americans. The reasons why it's not a 10 are that, yeah, it's Hollywooded up just a bit much, and that's true. That's going to be true of most movies. A few technical errors that are common in military movies, like explosions that have too much fire in it because they like that in the movies. But most explosions of military ammo, it's just a gray cloud and then the dirt. You might see a flash, but you're not going to see this billowing flames. They do that for the movies. Some of the dialogue might be considered a bit weak, and character development in most of the characters is going to be weak. But I mean, hey, you're cramming an entire historical event and a book into a 2-hour movie. And so those things are just inherent in movies. But I really like this movie, so 9 out of 10 for sure. What's going to come ahead of this movie? I think Black Hawk Down is going to be a 10 out of 10. And I did a review of that a couple of movies ago. So things like that. See, the Black Hawk Down, I mean, it's already 30 years old. And this movie is 5 years old. So I just so far behind in my movie watching. But the historical value of this movie, the production quality, the acting, all of it was superior. Watching this movie will be bittersweet because we're watching it post 2021. In 2021, we all watched the Biden bug out that surrendered Afghanistan back to the Taliban. All those lives lost, all the pain and suffering, the hundreds of billions of dollars, the sacred trust of friendship with our allies, all of it ruined by our weak government, weak leadership. And this movie predicted the end. It did. Well, I watched in awe at what our soldiers, our special forces, endured and accomplished along with our Afghan allies. I was disturbed throughout the movie, knowing the disgraceful end 20 years later. Nonetheless, you must watch this great movie so that you'll know what our nation is capable of when we unite and work together. Now, let's look at the facts. 12 Strong was filmed in New Mexico, as was Lone Survivor, and I did that review a while back too. It was released in January of 2018 by Warner Brothers, produced by Jerry Bruckheimer, who also produced Black Hawk Down in 2001. The movie was directed by Nikolai Fuglsvig, a Danish producer, and this was his American debut. The movie is based on the book by Doug Stanton, right here, Horse Soldiers. And actually, I've got a whiskey called Horse Soldiers. I've had a whiskey. I've finished the bottle, so I didn't have any left, or I would have been drinking that tonight. But it's based on that, and then two other writers who turned the book into the screenplay, Ted Talley and Peter Craig. Now let's look at some of the stars in the movie. Chris Hemsworth, of course, as Captain Mitch Nelson. Now they changed the names, and I'm not sure. They supposedly did that for security purposes or whatever, but I don't think they should have changed the names because by that time it was all over. But Mitch Nelson is Chris Hemsworth. In real life, it was Captain Mark Nutsch. Okay. Now, sadly, I throughout the movie I kept seeing Hemsworth as Thor. right? Because that's the role he's known for. So there you get typecasted, and it kind of affected uh, how I viewed him in the movie. But also, he had kind of the same character, the same attitude, I think, from Thor to this movie. So that just might be me. Michael Shannon played Chief Warrant Officer Hal Spencer. In real life, his name was Bob Pennington. And he was not actually wounded in the battle. You know, that was one of the places where they Hollywooded it up. They needed somebody to get wounded and almost die and have a medevac. And so that really didn't happen in the real battle. Okay, so that's, you know, it adds to the movie. It adds drama to the movie, especially because it links the family scenes in the front of the movie with what happens in the end. But in real life, it didn't happen. You had Michael Pena as Sam Diller, and Pena played in Shooter alongside Mark Wahlberg, and then Mark Wahlberg played in Lone Survivor. So Pena did a great role in this movie. So, but then probably my favorite actor in the movie was Navid Negahban. He's an Iranian actor who got out of Iran, thankfully, spent several years in Germany before coming to America as an actor. You know, you can't really be an actor in Iran, I guess. But he played General Dostum, right? And I think, you know, he was just my favorite actor and character in the movie. Just the development of his character, uh, it just very convincing acting job by Negabon. Okay. Rob Riggle played Lieutenant Colonel Bowers in this movie. Riggle had a 23-year career in the Marine Corps Reserve as, I think, public affairs officer or whatever. And at one point, he actually worked for the real Colonel Bowers, right? So that's interesting how that all tied in together. You've got William Fichtner. He played Colonel Mulholland. Now, Fichtner also played in Black Hawk Down. He was Special Operator, Delta Operator Sanderson, and that was in 2001. So, you know, there's lots of other actors, but those are the ones I wanted to mention because of their tie-ins with either active duty military or other movies, right? The runtime of this movie was 129 minutes. The budget was $35 million, and box office earnings were $71 million. The film did not win any awards, and critics tended to give it mediocre marks, while audience members tended to give it high marks in the category of an A. I would imagine that the audience had a fairly high proportion of males, active duty service members and their families, veterans and their families, and patriotic Americans who were familiar with the story or perhaps had read the book by Stanton. But, you know, critics do what critics do. Almost universally, if a critic pans a movie, I'm going to like it. So if a critic loves a movie, I'm not going to like it. That's just how it goes. Evaluation. This movie seems to me to do really two things. I mean, it's all entertainment, granted, but art is more than just entertainment, and movies are probably the highest form of art in America, at least the most popular form of art in America. And so I think the movie was legitimately trying to inform Americans that their servicemen had done some heroic stuff in this war. So it's informing us. It's telling us the story. And while I've not finished the book, I'm about halfway through the book. It does seem to me that the movie sticks very closely to the book, and so I like that in movies. If a movie, I mean, I just love movies that are based on solid historical happenings that tell a real story. And that's why I've done Black Hawk Down. That's why I did Lone Survivor. It's rooted in books, and then the books tell the story. And so the movie is informing us, but it's also inspiring us. It's inspiring Americans by giving us an action-packed Hua military movie that is is uplifting in some ways, but when they made the movie, they couldn't foresee this. The movie's unintentionally and sadly prophetic of our ultimate failure. The movie, again, sticks closely to the book and the historical events. Yeah, some Hollywood licenses given, like that scene where Spencer gets wounded in medevac. Yeah, and I don't mind, if they take a little bit of license in Hollywood to spruce some things up a little bit. I mean, that's part of it. Now, after 9/11, the U.S. needed to get some special operators from the CIA into Afghanistan who set up a meeting between the Green Beret ODA, Operational Detachment Alpha, and Alpha Team 595, commanded by Captain Nelson, or Nutsch. Uh, See, I'm going to be given the movie name and then the real name frequently throughout this. And then their job was to link up with the Northern Alliance, commanded by General Dostum. One thing I wish the movie had included, the book does, the book includes talking about the CIA operators who did this link up, one of whom was Mike Spann. And I remember Mike Spann in the news because he got killed in this operation. And I think he was the only American fatality in this operation. And Mike Spann, the book does bring out a lot of his background, his character. He was a believer. He had a new wife and baby, and he dies in this operation. And I really wish the movie had included that, but that happened a little bit after this primary action happened. So I think that's why they left it out. But to me, it really could have improved it if you added 10 more minutes to the movie and included that. So the movie opens with some gut-wrenching scenes from 9/11. It shows the towers burning. You hear the news commentators in the background, and you get some members of the team, and it shows how they get notified. I mean, Captain Nutsch or Nelson is at home. His daughter's watching the TV. She is probably 3, maybe 4 at the most, but I think 3. Points to TV, Daddy, watch that, and he turns around and looks and he sees what's happening, and he immediately goes to report in to base, because he knows this is bad. And then it shows some other members of the team training in the Cumberland River in Kentucky. This is by is where the 101st Airborne is. So they're training out there in the river, and they see some jets flying over, Air Force jets flying over real low, and they're concerned about that. And then when the guys come pick them up from their training exercise, the soldier says, "What, you guys don't know?" It's like, "No, we've been out here in the woods, and it's like, hey, America's been attacked." So that whole sequence, that whole 9/11 sequence is gut-wrenching. The Spence Pennington character, Pennington again is the real guy's name, the real warrant officer's name, and Spence is the movie name. Says, "How do you love your family and then leave them to go to war?" And that whole sequence there at the start of them saying goodbye to their families, man, I'm glad they included that, because families pay a huge price. Military families pay a huge price as they send their fathers, their husbands, sometimes wives, off to war. The focus on Captain Nelson trying to get his team back together, and CW4 Spencer tearing up his retirement papers, that sets the stage for their effort to get their team chosen by Colonel Mulholland to go into Afghanistan first. This same competitive spirit enters the relationship between Captain Nelson and General Dostum, which is essential for the success of the mission. One scene was particularly good. They're at the Alamo, that first base they set up, when Dostum starts addressing Spencer as if he's the commander. He's older than Captain Nelson, and so, and he's the second in charge. And so he addresses him thinking he's the commander, but Nelson interrupts him to make a point that it's he who's the captain. Dostum points out to the older team members who have killer eyes, and he wonders, why are they following Nelson, who doesn't have killer eyes? Nelson tells him that It's he who will be calling in the bombs. And if Dostum takes him to the Taliban, he will kill them. So that's just an interesting interplay between an old warrior versus a younger military commander who's not seen war. So this attitude of competitiveness, of aggressive leadership and toxic masculinity, that's a critical teaching point for our society in these dark days. In America for the past 40 years, manhood, masculinity, competition, aggressiveness have been torn apart, neglected, downplayed, and warped. But when terror strikes, when the whole land is no longer safe, to whom does America turn? Obese lesbians with purple hair, nose rings, and tats? Weak males who want to dress up and pretend to be women? Weak homosexuals who wear skinny jeans, man buns, and paint their nails? No. America turns to real men. Men who are dangerous, not tame. Confident, masculine, and trained to go kill the enemy. The portrayal of these Special Forces soldiers as family men, husbands and fathers, who are also stalkers, hunters, and killers. Men who seek to right what is wrong in the world and defend what is the good, the true, and the beautiful. It's heartwarming. This theme is portrayed vividly in the movie. The safest way to protect their families is to go far from home and deal death and destruction upon the enemy. Captain Nelson Nutsch says, "We quit now, and what happened back home will happen again and again." Prophetic. The movie shows the Taliban for the animals they are. We see the woman who is tortured and executed in front of her little girls. For what? Adultery? Nope. Being a spy? Nope. Being a druggie? Nope. She is shot in front of her family for teaching her daughters to read and do math. The Muslims, you see, fear education, and rightly so. Sidebar, Muslims have 1.2 billion population and a total of 6 Nobel Prizes. Jews have 12 million people worldwide, 214 Nobel Prizes. Go figure. This movie properly portrays General Dostum as hating the Taliban for their evils and their destruction of his people, his family, his home. It clearly shows there's a civil war going on in Afghanistan. It's pointed out a couple of times that Al-Qaeda and Taliban come from outside of Afghanistan. Though filmed in 2017, the movie repeatedly foreshadows the events of 2021, as time and again it's hinted at or said boldly by General Dostum that the Americans will eventually tire of this war and leave. He says, "There are no right choices here. This is Afghanistan, the graveyard of many empires. Today you are our friend, tomorrow our enemy. It will be no different for America. You will be cowards if you leave, our enemies if you stay." How right he was. This movie was a gut punch with this theme. Now some application. What can a soldier learn from this great movie? First of all, war comes suddenly. 9/11 happened because America was asleep. The hits on 9/11 woke us up temporarily, united us temporarily. War comes upon a people suddenly, even though the signs are there. When a civilian signs up for the military, he or she is signing up for war and should always think in those terms. You're not signing up for a job. You're not signing up for benefits or a disability check or a retirement check. Secondly, competence and confidence and aggressiveness. If you have confidence when you have no competence, you're a braggart, a fool. Knowledge and proficiency in your job should combine with a healthy attitude of confidence. That's what you're looking for. The aggressiveness comes from knowing there are man-eating lions out there that are ready, willing, and eager to eat those you love, and you're protecting them. You must defeat them. Go after them. Hunt them down. Captain Nelson looked young and inexperienced to General Dostum, and he was inexperienced in war, but he had trained and worked with his team to the point where they were going to follow him into combat. His competence, confidence, and aggressiveness produced courage, and he prevailed in battle. Third, your politicians in general will fail you. All you can do is carry out the mission as given, win your battle, bring your team back home. Ultimately, Afghanistan failed because Well, the Afghans were too weak and corrupt to resist the Taliban. They shared the same religion and culture and couldn't keep the dark side away. But the United States, we couldn't figure out how to defeat this religion, nor how to train the Afghans to fight in their own war. After 20 long years, we did the Biden bug out. Like the Vietnam War, we and the nation we sought to help both failed. Our soldiers can hold their heads high, though. This loss was on the politicians and the host country. Yeah, it sucks. Bitter tears all around. But you did your duty. He who adapts wins. Fourth, the troops of ODA 595 had never trained on horseback. Intelligence failed to spot this problem, but Nutsch's team had a can-do spirit and adapted to the situation. An obstacle was presented, and they broke through and became genuine Cav troopers. This may be a forever question of military trivia. When was the last horse cavalry charged by the U.S. Army? October of 2001. In any military unit, ever-changing situations always present themselves, and flexibility and adaptability are the attributes you need to win. So if you have not watched 12 Strong or read the books Horse Soldier or Swords of Lightning, and this book is by Captain Mark Nutsch, Warrant Officer Bob Pennington, and co-author Jim DeFelici. I've not read this one yet. I'm halfway through Stanton's book. But if you've not watched the movie, I strongly recommend it. It's a true story of American and Afghan heroes. It has a tragic conclusion 20 years later. So tonight, in honor of Veterans Day, I've been drinking Minuteman Single Malt American Whiskey by Leadslinger Spirits, a whiskey brand owned by Matt Best. Here's his book. He was an Army Ranger and CIA operator, and he and a group of other military veterans started this whiskey company coming out of Scissortail Distillery in Oklahoma. And then this glass, you'll see, has a Red Devil on it. It says 3rd HTLB. I got this from my unit back in the 9th Infantry Division, 3rd Brigade, when I was in 40 years ago. All right, this is Stab the Dragon. In hoax, in yo winkies, out here.